let's talk about The Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Let's jump right into this. I have so much to say. What a start for a series, what a start for a story, and what a start for a classic. Whew. This is something else. I finally understand the hype. I really, really do. For a lot of you who don't know me, I have never read The Lord of the Rings, so this is actually my first time going through this series, and let me just say, my mind is blown, to put it quite frankly. Where do you even start? Where do you even start with a story as epic as this? Well, slowly. Let's just say that. This book starts off very, very slow. So a lot of people are probably going to get turned off from this series just because of the pacing. Everyone knows Lord of the Rings is classic. It's the greatest fantasy series of all time. But I wouldn't say when you sit down and you're reading this, maybe as a beginner of fantasy or someone new into it, you're probably not going to have the greatest time ever, even though this is one of the greatest books ever. And the reason for that is just because of the pace. A lot of this book is walking and talking and meandering through Middle Earth and going on this journey. And I personally love that. I love this book. I understand the hype now of why people are so obsessed with this series, and we're going to talk about all that. But if you're like, hey, should I read this like right now? Should I just jump right into it? I would ask you, what have you read before? Because this is not, in my opinion, a good starting point for fantasy. But when you read it, it's probably going to ruin every other fantasy series out there because it's that good, because it's that special. And trust me, we're going to get into some of those reasons why. But purely from a beginner standpoint, should you read this? Yes, 100%, but just make sure you have other fantasy series under your belt first, even though a lot of people say, oh, you should read Fellowship, you should read The Lord of the Rings to get an understanding of all these other series. But I'm under the notion that this is not the best starting place for fantasy. Is it the best fantasy series ever? Yes. Is this book one of the best fantasy books ever written? 100%. This series is incredible. I absolutely love it, but just maybe start elsewhere and then come back to this. So the pacing is on the tougher side, and I think the language also is going to be on the tougher side for a lot of people. But if you take it slow, if you take it piece by piece, I think you're really, really going to have a good time with this. So let's jump into why you would want to read this. In my opinion, the world building alone is going to be the biggest reason you read this, hands down. I have never seen world building like this. Now I understand, guys. People have been telling me to read The Lord of the Rings for the longest time. I didn't think it was for me. I didn't know when I would get to it. I thought I would struggle greatly with it, but now I really do understand what is so special about this. This is going to be the most fleshed out world you will ever come across in a fantasy novel. And now I understand why a lot of people, when they read something like the Stormlight Archive or The Name of the Wind, it feels like it's almost like a copycat, or it's not even holding a candle to what Tolkien created. That doesn't make them bad books. I just think it's easy for this series to ruin other fantasy, because it's like watching the greatest movie you've ever seen in your life, the greatest movie ever made, and then it's like, oh, now I'm watching other ones and it's just not really hitting the same. It could do that. This series could do that because this world is so fleshed out. It is the most real, lived in, detailed world you could ever imagine. Everything feels real. The history is so deep and intricate and methodical and planned. And the stories, the lore dumps that you're going to get in this are the best you maybe could ever come across, because there's an entire language in here. There's like an elvish language, and I'm not kidding about that. It is it's a real language that you can speak and you can write. He draws it, he writes it in this. You see, like, there are drawings and stuff that he has in this, and then you also see the language being written. There are songs sung in this language. It is insane. And so I'm not going to talk about the entire Lord of the Rings because I obviously haven't read it. So I want to kind of really hone in more on just Fellowship. But because I think, obviously this is where a lot of people are going to start, and also where a lot of people are going to get hung up. Don't go into this picturing anything extremely fast paced. Go into it for that long, methodical, frolicking through the flowers kind of feel. And I think you'll really enjoy it. Like, enjoy the world building. Don't expect that it's kind of, it needs to all be there. It has reason, it has this and that, and it does, but just let it flow, Don't try and sit there and figure every single thing out. Just listen to the stories. Like when Gandalf will tell a story or something, or, the elves will tell something about, their history and where swords came from, or, who, chopped off the finger of Sauron, with the ring on it. So there are going to be so many cool stories like that, so much history packed into these. And if you really take your time with it, if you really just sit there, you let it build, you let it marinate, it's going to blow your mind. If you like deep, intricate, planned out worlds, the Fellowship of the Ring is going to have so much quote unquote downtime where you're just learning about Middle Earth and the rings and the One Ring, and learning about where these things came from, how they came to be, how to defeat the darkness, how to get to Mordor. And you're going to have a blast. This was one of the most enjoyable reading experiences I've had, despite its slow pace, because I just said to myself, and look how cool this looks. I'm not going to rush through this. I'm going to take my time. It took me probably a month to read, maybe. And obviously I've been working on my novel, which we'll talk about at the end, which kind of delayed the reading speed of it, but it was so good. There's nothing like it. There is nothing like the Fellowship of the Ring. And I'm going to go and just jump straight into these two because I think I need to. I'm not going to take too big of a break. I might do a palate cleanser. I might read a short story, or, one of these Patrick Rothfuss short stories or something like that. But I'm not going to pick up a new book because I think I need to just continue on. I don't want to forget the characters. I don't want to forget the lore. I don't want to forget the story. I need to just jump right in. But the Fellowship of the Ring is going to be the greatest introduction to any fantasy world I think that you can get. Like I said, the world building alone that you're going to get through this, the explanations, the history, that makes it worth kind of like, and it's not even a slog. It's really not a slog, because I can't say that I wasn't entertained or invested in some aspect, whether it was the writing style, whether it was the world building, whether it was the characters, all these things hooked me in some way, drew me into the story. So I was entertained for the majority of this book. There's one section, which I bet a lot of you know what it's going to be, which we'll talk about later. But there's one section that didn't quite hold my attention, but everything else, there's something there that definitely did. So besides just the world building, besides what you're going to get just from that, I think another big reason to jump into this is the characters. Frodo is a great protagonist. I don't think he's the reason you read this, though. I'm excited to see how his character develops, because I wouldn't say he has much autonomy in the first book. Not a knock, not a bad thing at all. It's a part of his arc. It's a part of the story. He's, given this ring. It's his responsibility. He's got to save the world. but he's not a warrior, he's a hobbit. And he's not a leader. He's not Aragorn or Legolas or whatever. And he's not like these, badass hunters and, people trackers and things like that. He's just a hobbit. And he didn't go on an adventure. He didn't do what Bilbo did. He's lived in the Shire his whole life. And I think that's what makes him so cool, is that he is just this underdog. He's a nobody. He doesn't have any powers necessarily. He doesn't have anything. And I think that that's what's so cool about this, is like most fantasy stories, you're going to have a main character who is extremely overpowered, is going to have some defining thing. And Frodo doesn't really seem to have that. He's got the blade, he's got Sting, he's got his best friend, Sam, he's got the other hobbits, you got Pippin in there, you got Merry, and it's just, they're just so average. Everyone is so average. And I love like Sam's heroism. He's so courageous. He's like the best friend. He's like the best friend you could ever ask for. It's just something about him. His just positivity is contagious. It's a very, very cool character. But aside from that, I would say Gandalf is one of my favorite characters ever. The aura that Gandalf has, he's just so cool. The stories he tells, the knowledge, the wisdom he has, these one-liners, the quotes in this are just amazing. If you want philosophy, read this book. If you want lines to underline and to remember and to read over, it's going to have this, right? Not all who wander are lost, right? You're going to find a lot of quotes that are going to resonate with you by reading this book. It's incredible. I understand it now. Even though I wouldn't say, like I said, it's not the fastest book in the world. It's going to be a slog. It's going to be hard to get through at some points. It's not going to be a good starting point for most people. I would say you really should read a lot of other fantasy, maybe easier fantasy, to work up to this. But when you get to it, the Fellowship of the Ring is going to knock your socks off. It's going to be fantastic. You're going to love it. You're going to have a blast with it. And then if we talk about some other characters, you've got Aragorn in there. When we finally met him, he's Strider, he's the Strider or whatever. That to me is where the story really kind of took off, really found its legs, and really was like, whoa, okay, now we're getting into some really fun stuff. And just meeting the building of the Fellowship, was just amazing. The Council of Elrond chapter, if you are a massive fan of just deep world building, that's 2 hours of world building, 2 full hours of just all of the members of the Fellowship talking about the ring, how they came across it, and how they think they should destroy it. It's amazing. They're getting their plan together, and it's 2 full hours of just lore dumps, and it's amazing. But really, once the Fellowship comes together, that's where I found that the story really picked up for me. And of course, when they go into the Mines of Moria, be prepared for some really cool stuff. I think like a lot of people have said, like Tolkien can't really write action. He doesn't really get into the nitty gritty, and it's not blow by blow. It's more of an overview. And I don't know who those people are, because when they get into the Mines of Moria, this shit picks up. I mean, this takes off. The action in the Mines of Moria is so descriptive, so detailed, beautiful. So he can write action. So I am very excited to see some of the battles, see some of the wars, like whatever's coming next. I'm excited for that, because it's so cool. Tolkien writes in such a fluid way, and even his action flows like water. So let's talk about a few more things, and then maybe one thing that I didn't quite like, and then wrap up here, because we still have 2 more books to read. So I just wanted to give a quick check-in, let you guys know that I am hooked. I'm ready. This is awesome. So I'm ready to keep going. I love Lord of the Rings. I'm a fan. So the description in this, the prose, a lot of people will say it's very flowery and it's over the top, but I don't think it is. I think it's exactly what it needs to be. Cormac McCarthy writes in a very similar way where it's just every word really matters. And I wouldn't say Tolkien is that deliberate with it, but the writing is stellar. He has a full mastery over the English language and the way he uses it and the way that the sentences flow and how the paragraphs are structured. It's amazing. I was blown away by how well and how easy this was to read, even though I think some people might still struggle with it, because I wouldn't say you can just sit down and you need to pay attention. It's not just something that you can kind of just fly through or finish in an afternoon. It's heavy. It's dense. The prose and the writing style can be tiring. The lore, the information, the world building that you're going to be constantly bombarded with, it can get tiring. So that being said, I don't think that you can just fly through these unless you're just absolutely hooked. I think it is kind of a harder book to read, but when you get into the flow of the writing, it's a breeze. It flies. I know that's contradictory, but I hope that makes sense. It's not something, it takes brain power to sit down and read, but the actual way it's structured just is easy. It's not abrasive. So that's really good. Description, vocabulary, amazing. And just even the describing of the setting of the world of Middle Earth and, the statues that are out there that just stand tall, you really get a sense of scale and being and wow, this stuff has been here for a long time. And then their journey, you have a map in the back of these things where you can actually see the exact journey they took and the river they're traveling down or the mountains that they're trying to cross or the marshes that they're walking through. And it feels so real, so lived in. So world building first and foremost, got to read it for that. Got to read it for the characters second. The story in this is fine. Like I said, it's not super plot driven. It's really not. I would say it's world driven. It's really just setting up the world. It's setting up the setting. It's explaining Middle Earth. It's explaining the history, but I would not say it's a story driven, plot driven book at all. Yes, they are on this journey. They're on a quest. You know where they're going. You know where they're heading, and where they're trying to end up and all that. But don't expect you open every chapter and you're like, okay, the plot's moving today. It's kind of sometimes it's just going to meander. You're just like the Council of Elrond chapter. You're going to 2 hours of them just explaining the next move or trying to figure out the next move. But that's what you have to enjoy about it. Some of my favorite chapters were just where Gandalf is just telling a story or something like that. And it's just, you got nowhere else to be. You got to lock in. But definitely story is probably on the bottom. Story is going to be on the bottom for why you'd read this. Even though the story is amazing, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that the world building and the characters and everything are just above it in terms of what I would recommend to someone. But I wouldn't recommend, hey, this is the most plot heavy book. But the story is coming together. It is a setup. It's just part one. We're in the first act. It's all set up. Yes, it's 400 something pages of setup, and yes, that can be a lot for a lot of people, but it's not a deal breaker. It's not going to bore you out of your mind. It's working toward. You can tell Tolkien is cooking. He's working towards something cool. So you just got to bear with it. But I think that those are really just all the positives I have. It's incredible. It's a classic. It's amazing. I can't knock it. The only thing I have to say is Tom Bombadil. What the fuck? Who is he? What is he? Why was he included in this? What were those chapters? And why has no one ever told me about Tom freaking Bombadil? I mean, I have never heard that name before. I've never seen anything about it. I've never seen it talked about. So I'm so confused. Maybe I just missed it because I didn't know what it was before, but can someone explain that to me? That was insane. And it's crazy to me that a lot of people recommend Fellowship, start with Fellowship and, get into fantasy that way. If this was the first fantasy book I ever read, I'd be like, damn, this is fantasy. what the hell is Tom Bombadil? Like, this is just strange. And the singing, the songs, there are so many songs in this, which are, some of them are bangers, but especially listening to the audiobook, the Andy Serkis audiobook, which might have been a mistake, but overall I felt like the read was pretty good. Not my favorite, but pretty good. The songs can just be so awkward to listen to. And Tom Bombadil is the weirdest character I've ever come across. It almost lost me. I almost gave up. I usually will finish every book I start, but Tom Bombadil was definitely strange. Definitely strange. So I don't know what was going on with that. I don't know what was going. I have no idea. I need someone to try and explain to me what the hell that was. And I know he doesn't come back up. I know he came from like another Tolkien story or something like that. So maybe that's why he was included. But I feel really bad for the people who don't push past the Tom Bombadil chapters, because the rest of the book, especially the ending, really, really finds its groove. You know, they go into the mines of Moria like that. That's like a pretty big turning point. But obviously when the Fellowship comes together for the first time, that's when it really hooked me. But man, were those Tom Bombadil chapters just brutal to get through. So that's pretty much it. That's the only thing that just didn't really work for me. I still loved it. I still think it's a classic. I still think it is probably the best fantasy series ever written, you know, of all time. We're about to find out when I read these next two books. We've got the Two Towers here, then we've got the Return of the King here. And these two books, you know, I think are going to be different from this in all the best ways possible. I don't know which, you guys got to let me know, like, what are your favorites between all three books? Like, which one's your favorite? I don't know which one's going to be my favorite. I assume it's not going to be Fellowship just because the pacing was tough. But I'm excited to see some of those big, you know, like Helm's Deep and stuff like that. I'm excited to see some of these battles and some of these wars, and I can't wait to see, you know, how this story ends. I've watched the first two movies. I haven't seen the third, so I will watch the whole thing, extended editions, all that once I'm ready. It's going to be fun. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a good time. I can't wait. I'm super excited to start these next two books. Let me know what I have in store. We've got a lot more to talk about. I think if I do a review for the Two Towers, or if I just read both of them and then just do an overall review, because I don't want to, you know, talk too much about the same stuff. I probably will talk more in depth about the actual events of the book rather than an overview, but we'll just see. I think I'm just going to read these two and then just do a, you know, I read The Lord of the Rings as an adult for the first time, that kind of thing. But I wanted to showcase Fellowship because I think it's important to talk about it when a lot of people are wondering, you know, should I get into this series or not? I would say, obviously, it's a classic for a reason. It's fantastic. I loved it. It's amazing. But just understand, Fellowship is not what I would consider an easy book to read. I think like The Name of the Wind would be a much better place to start if you're trying to get into fantasy, or a Wizard of Earthsea, something like that. And a lot of a Wizard of Earthsea, like the way it's written, it felt very Tolkien-esque. But now I understand where a lot of people come from, where it's like, oh, everything's just derivative of Tolkien, everything's just copying it, because it's like, it's just the gold standard. You really can't get better than this. It's going to be hard to top this. That being said, though, do not jump right into Fellowship if you don't have much experience. If you do, don't be afraid. Go for it. I think it's foundational. And it's funny, you know, people used to tell me I'm not allowed to be a writer. I'm not allowed to be a fantasy author unless I've read The Lord of the Rings. And that's kind of ridiculous to me. I do understand how foundational this is. I do understand how important this is to read as a fantasy author, but I don't think it's required to tell your own stories. And I think that you could even come up with new things if you've not read these, you know, and you don't have that in your mind, and you're like, oh, maybe I might just, you know, take something from this, or I'm inspired by this. It's like, if you have nothing in your mind fantasy wise, you might be more inclined to read, you know, to come up with something new that hasn't been seen before. Or you might come up with something and then you read this and like, oh shit, they came up with it before. But I don't think it's required to be a writer. I think if you are a writer, you definitely should read this at some point, especially if you're a fantasy writer. No doubt. It's a classic. It's stood the test of time. It's the greatest fantasy series of all time. But is it like, do you need to read it to write novels? No. You can write novels if you want. You can write your story. You don't need to have read The Lord of the Rings in order to write books. But that being said, you definitely should read it if you are a fantasy writer. So now I understand where people are coming from with that, but I still think it's a bit misguided. I don't think every single person has to read this in order to tell their stories. Tell your stories, write what you want to write, and have fun with it. That's the ultimate goal. But I definitely think you should pick this up eventually. And I'm very happy I did. I'm very happy. I'm going to get this series in my mind. I'm excited to talk about it with you all. But no rating, not 9 out of 10, not 10 out of 10. Classic. That's it. Just classic. Classic right there. Absolute cinema. Absolute literature. It is amazing. You can't put a number on it. It's unlike anything you've ever read before. There's nothing like it. There will never be anything like it. I understand now. I understand the hype. I get it, guys. Thank you for talking me into finally reading this. I loved it. It's amazing. Amazing. That's all I can say, guys. So that's it for today's video. If you enjoyed it, want to see more, drop a like, subscribe, check out some of the other videos. I'll put, playlists and stuff up there. I'll put the last video above me. But yeah, we got a lot of fun stuff going. If you haven't seen it yet, check out The Darkness Grows Within. It's my next novel coming out, which will be under the Demon Gunner series. So the full title, The Demon Gunner, The Darkness Grows Within. I am super excited to release this. I've been working on it for a minute. I don't know if it'll be out by the time this video is released, but I assume most of you guys watching this, the book will be out by then. I'm hoping in the next week or two that we can release it. Just putting the very, very, very final touches on it. But it's a horror fantasy Western. I'm kind of calling it a mix between The Gunslinger meets God of War meets The Road meets Dark Souls video games. Like, it's got all of those elements to it. It's got the demonic elements. It's got the journey of God of War. It's got the Western kind of fantasy setting of the Gunslinger. Again, the journey of The Road. It's got all in the horror of all that. It's got all that mixed in there. So it's kind of a big fusion. I love mashing up genres and seeing what I can do with them. So, The Darkness Grows Within, that's my attempt at writing a fantastical horror Western world. So I'm super excited. It's going to be a trilogy. Super excited to get that first book out to you guys. It'll be available on Amazon. Link will be down below. It'll be in paperback, hardcover, and ebook. Check it out if you're interested in that. I'll be making a video on that soon enough. How I came up with it, what I think of it, why you should read it, things like that. But if you have any questions, let me know. I also want to let you guys know that there is now a YouTube community feature that we have access to. So if you want to post what you're reading, you're more than welcome to drop anything you want on there. Questions, comments, updates on what you're reading, anything, recommendations from me for a next book haul, next thing I should read. I'm probably going to read The Devils after this. I've got it back here. We've now got the Abercrombie books back there. We also have a new Boba Fett helmet, if you guys notice. So this thing is so freaking cool. So I got this as a memento for releasing, my next book. I want to always get some type of cool little knickknack. I got the Mandalorian helmet for the Golden Academy, so I thought, why not pick up the Boba Fett helmet for The Darkness Grows Within? And so I'm super excited to have this now on the shelf. But you guys got to see this, this feature here. So the helmet, reminds me, every time I look at it, reminds me of the novel that I just released and the work and everything that went into it. But I love this feature right here. So you have this rangefinder, right? You press this button on the side here, drops down, lights up, but that's not even the coolest part. I don't know if you can even see this. I'm going to drop a short. Maybe you can't see it. Shit, kind of there. Yeah, you can barely see it there maybe. There's a functional display back in there. And I'll drop the short on YouTube and everything of me unboxing it, but there's an actual functional display for the rangefinder that lights up when it drops down, and it's so cool. You can see it through the helmet. The interior I wouldn't say is nearly as detailed as the Mandalorian helmet, but hey, it's still super cool. I think the outside is way more detailed. I love that electronic rangefinder. It's so badass. So the Berserk books have been moved up there. I don't know if you can see them. And now, the Boba Fett helmet will take its place. We've got the 2 helmets here. And anytime I release a book, I'm going to pick up some type of knick-knack, fantasy, science fiction, video game, related thing to always remind me of, get that sense of accomplishment, for publishing a book or whatever. So we got all that stuff now. Just continue to grow the collection. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. I'm just going to keep talking about books and sharing my love for art with you guys. So hope everything's going well, and catch you guys next time. Talk to you later. See ya.